And we will open it up for questions and discussion about the resilient food system infrastructure. We have an hour and a half reserved for this call, so people can simply just either unmute themselves and ask questions, or if you'd like, you can also drop your question in the chat box. I'll also be monitoring the chat box. So, and the purpose of these calls, and again, assuming that people did see the announcements that came out about the grant opening for the infrastructure program on January 1st, is to answer any questions you may have after watching the training video about the grant. So I imagine we may spend the first few minutes kind of going over some of what the training video did cover, just to help clarify things. And so that's where we are. Gabrielle, do you want to just unmute yourself and ask that question, because I'm not sure which. Did you want me to go over the PowerPoints of just the?
No, that quick little PowerPoint that I put together earlier that we talked about using for the first 10-15 minutes of these calls.
Okay, I don't know which one
it should be on our Teams, or I emailed it to you.
Okay. Would you mind either forwarding that to me or just sharing your screen, and I can walk through that, because I'm starting to get some questions that are coming in already.
Yeah, let me see where it is. Hold on.
Okay, Pedro, do you have a question? Do you want to go ahead and ask that?
Sure. Well, hello everybody. This is Pedro for Belas Karate. I'm here with my wife Adriana. We're co-business owners at Three Sisters Nixtamal. We make organic corn tortillas in Portland, Oregon. And I'm getting used to this new format. I usually Zoom. I don't know if this is a new Microsoft tool. So I just have a question. Just looking at the amount of funds that were allocated for this grant and considering the two categories, it seems like there's not a lot of funds available. I don't know how that's broken down. And if I remember from the video, it was kind of depends what comes in. But it seems like we're going to probably go with a smaller equipment grant, just because a lot of the questions on the larger infrastructure grant asks questions like, we're thinking about opening a new facility, and that involved quite a bit. And with contractors, like, there's no way we can turn around a budget on that. So I guess the question is, one is about the allocation of funds, because at first I'm like, wow, this is great grant, but seeing how little money is actually going towards those $2 million infrastructure grants, it just kind of gets me scratching my head. And then the practical one is just, it sounds like we're not going to be able to do that. We're going to, I guess, just not qualify for the large infrastructure at this time. Or am I, like, how much flexibility is some of those categories around infrastructure and getting budgets from contractors? Thanks.
Yeah. Sure. So the question is really around some of those the budget allocation for the infrastructure grant program and the equipment grant program. So, I guess one consideration is that these are federal dollars. The allocation of these funds have been made on a formula that the USDA has created specifically for each state. So Oregon was awarded $5.9 million in total. And you can see that the breakout of those funds was determined by an industry survey that Department of Agriculture conducted with folks to determine where most of the funding should be, or where the funding should be allocated towards. So we have $2.8 million that's available for infrastructure dollars, $1.2 million that's available for equipment only purchases, and then the state is holding back about $1 million for state-led coordination and state-led initiatives that are yet to be determined and could be somewhat determined by the award pattern of both this infrastructure grant and the equipment dollars to see where there may be some additional need for funding to support projects. It will not be available in it won't be available in hard infrastructure. The funding that's being held back by the Department of Ag is not for hard infrastructure, but more of coordination or initiative type activities that will help strengthen those projects that have been awarded. And then the rest of the funds are held back to support the department in administering the grant program. So that includes staff to run the program and some of the other administrative costs that the agency needs for overhead to manage the funds. So these are federal funds, and those allocations are not something that we have flexibility with. And so it is unlikely that because of the award limitations, it is unlikely that for example, a $2 million project would be funded. So, the emphasis here is really from the USDA on shoring up the middle of the supply chain and helping the middle of the supply chain in Oregon. So aggregators, processors, transportation distributors, help them source from a lot of the new and emerging small producers and smaller food business in the state who have underdeveloped markets. So the scale of these projects may be smaller than some of you as business owners, may be suited for. It does not mean you're not eligible, but you may, it may be beyond some of what your infrastructure needs may be at this time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, we'll just hang out and see if we can clarify some other questions later. Thank you.
Amy, I re-forwarded you the PowerPoint, so it should be at the top of your email inbox.
Okay. And then I'll just answer this question, and then we'll go through a quick overview of the grant, since it sounds like people may need that. These funds are intended for food manufacturers. So I don't know what exactly, but that means. But if you're processing product, Oregon product that's sourced from Oregon producers, you will be eligible for these funds, or will you be suited for these funds? And both food hubs and manufacturers would be eligible, yes. So if you're processing product, you're making product from Oregon ingredients, or if you're simply aggregating product from Oregon producers and redistributing that product, that is correct. These are the middle of the supply chain activities that this program is funding. All right. Let's see. I am going to see if I can share my screen here. Give me 1 second here.
While Amy's getting the her screen set, I can explain a little bit about the middle of the supply chain to answer your question there. The USDA defines the food supply chain in 4 phases. The first being production, the second is processing, the third aggregation or distribution, and the fourth is markets and consumers. For the breadth of this program, we're really only looking for processing or aggregation distribution products. That's what is considered the middle of the supply chain. On the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure, or RFSI, website for the Oregon Department of Agriculture, in the bottom, if you scroll clear to the bottom, there's a lot of information, but just keep going, scroll all the way down. There's a FAQ in the resource section. I'll also throw a link in the chat, and you guys can see the USDA full definition of middle of the supply chain, and that should really help you understand that processing, aggregation, distribution is really what these grant funds are intended for. By the way, my name is Gabrielle Ugaldi. I'm with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. I'm currently essentially running the Resilient Food Systems program. Amy is doing a lot of the outreach, and so I'm just here to answer some other questions with her.
All right, great. Thanks, Gabrielle. All right, we are going to talk a little bit more about this, what we mean by middle of the supply chain, to help kind of clarify that. So Gabrielle has put together some of these slides here. We're going to kind of go through these. And then again, if you haven't already, to become familiar with this GRAP program, we really encourage you to view the training video. Gabrielle dropped that link in the chat. It's on the ODA YouTube page. And that training video is going to go through in a lot of detail and a lot of depth the application process for the Resilient Food System Infrastructure and what the aim is of the USDA with these funds. So if you haven't already seen the training video, we really encourage you to do that as one of your first steps before you start completing the application or looking through the application materials. So as Gabrielle was saying, the Resilient Food System Infrastructure, hopefully I believe everybody can see my screen. Maybe Gabrielle can just give me a heads up. So we're going to just kind of quickly go over in a few minutes here what the RFSI is, the national program, how Oregon's program is going to work, the timeline, and the application process. So we're going to hit the highlights, and then if you have more specific questions about allowable types of projects or infrastructure costs, things like that, some of the details about match requirements and things like that, we're going to open it up for conversation. So what is the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program? So as we mentioned already, sorry, I cannot for some reason get my slideshow to work. So you're going to have to see some of those notes there. But so this is the USDA's definition or the purpose of the program. But what they'd really like us to do is be building the middle of the supply chain and really build up what they're calling the resilience of the middle of the supply chain. A lot of this is based on what happened during the COVID pandemic, and you saw, which I'm sure many of you did, a lot of supply chain disruption, and really, I think it helped illuminate some of what we need at the local and regional level to make sure that supply chains are efficient and that there's better that there's better throughput throughout the regional supply chain. So this is what their goal is with these funds. They want to strengthen local and regional food systems. So I mentioned that a lot of the emphasis on shoring up or building up the infrastructure and equipment capacity within the middle of the supply chain is intended to, where they're intending to do that so that those actors can support more new and emerging farms and food businesses in Oregon. So they really want to see that as an outcome. And then what does that mean? So the funds will support expanded capacity for aggregating product, minimally processing product, or making value-added products with Oregon ingredients with those farms and businesses that have product at that scale, manufacturing those products, storing them, cold storage, warehouse storage, a big need within Oregon. And transporting those products into the end market. So that's kind of the overarching purpose of it. These are some of the allowable products under the RFSI program. So all specialty crops or all edible specialty crops are eligible. So fruits and vegetables, tree nuts, edible flowers, herbs. So you can see a list there. Dairy products are also eligible. Grains for human consumption. Aquaculture products are also eligible, or aquaculture food fish is eligible. Other food products, and these are the other excluded products are meat, poultry, and wild-caught seafood. Those products are not allowable under the RFSA. And then these are the types of eligible entities that can apply for the funds. And we know that there's a lot of different types of groups that are actually operating in the middle of the supply chain. So that's why you see sort of an expansion of eligibility to include local governments, institutions such as schools, universities, or hospitals that may be doing some aggregation, particularly in rural Oregon, where, for example, we know that schools sometimes do warehouse and hold product for other schools due to some of the transportation barriers and warehousing capacity in those regions. So that's why you see these other groups eligible for these funds. So for-profit businesses, producers or processors, or groups of producers and processors, also nonprofit organizations that may be operating in the middle of the supply chain are eligible. And then, of course, government entities that may be part of some of these activities may So we will have two tracks for these funds, and right now, as you know, the infrastructure grant is open. That is the only one that's open at this time. And this will be, so applications are open, and from $100,000 to $2 million are the available funding, the funding amounts or the funding range. These will be 3-year projects, and we anticipate that these projects may start as early as August, or hopefully by the fall. USDA will approve our plan for spending for these projects. And so, there will be a 3-year project would run for a maximum of 3 years. And there is a 25 to 50% matching requirement, which we can answer questions about if you have them. And again, the infrastructure dollars must expand capacity in the middle of the supply chain. So this goes beyond just applying for equipment. So this would include things like new construction or retrofitting an existing building, building new walls, putting in plumbing, putting in processing lines. This also includes technical assistance or specific training that you might need for yourself or employees or other partners on your project. So the infrastructure track is a much broader sort of picture of your project, and includes some of those both soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure as we sort of see them. The equipment only grant will actually open on February 1st. Both of these grant tracks, the applications are due by February 29th. And the equipment only track is for anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 request and purchases. There is no match requirement for this track. This does need to be a 1-year project. And again, the equipment that you need must be necessary or must be used within the middle of the supply chain. So, basically post-farm gate or post-harvest activities would be what you're looking at with these funds. And again, this is only for equipment. So if you need to train staff on how to use this equipment, or you need to, build out more infrastructure, or there's certain other types of costs associated with using the equipment, that would not be an equipment only grant. So this is specifically just to purchase the equipment, but would not cover the cost of installing the equipment. All right, so essentially we have 2 tracks. This is a little bit of review, but essentially the way it will run is like I said, there's 2 tracks. There's the infrastructure project, and then the equipment project as well. There's the difference in the periods in which those grants will run. A 3-year grant for infrastructure, a 1-year grant period for equipment. There will be reporting requirements for both tracks. And so you can see those there. For infrastructure, you'll be required to submit a progress report and financial reporting twice yearly, and then equipment, it'll be a reduced amount of reporting requirements. We do have an advisory committee that's going to be reviewing these grant applications that will start meeting after these grants are submitted. So we have a 15-member industry group, and those individuals are representing this part of the industry, a lot of the middle of the supply chain and regional supply chain area. And then, as I said earlier, you can see the breakdown of how the funds have been dedicated to the different tracks, and then the state-led work that will be managed by ODA. So we do have priority areas that the USDA has asked us to take a look at for the USDA Resilient Food System infrastructure dollars. These are those areas: small and underserved business owners, historically underserved farmers and ranchers, and then other businesses that qualify under the Small Business Administration's definition of those groups. And so we do have some guidance in the application material about what these groups are, and where you can find out whether or not you meet these definitions. So if you have questions about that, please feel free to let us know if you're having trouble finding out whether or not you meet these priority categories. So there are some sections of the application that you will need to self-identify as these groups.
Amy, can I stop you right there for a second?
Sure. Yeah.
So for Amy mentioned earlier that this program does require matching funds. A portion of those matching funds USDA is stating is what we call a graduated match. Essentially what that means is if you meet one of these prioritized areas listed here, you automatically qualify for 25% required matching instead of the 50% required matching. So it's really key to understand these areas and see where you might fit into them or not fit into them. Because if you don't fit into them and you turn an application in and you say, oh, I do fit into these groups and only provide 25% matching, but in reality you should have had 50, your application will automatically be disqualified. So please make sure that you reach out with questions around these areas. Again, everything is available on our website, and the requests for applications go in deeper detail about all of this. So please make sure that you read through that and understand that, because it could lead to disqualifying an application if you don't have the correct amount of match.
All right, thanks, Gabrielle. And then these are a list of some of the infrastructure priorities. Some of these are from the USDA. Some of these are also from, again, I mentioned that we did that industry level survey in Oregon, and some of these were suggested by a number of you and maybe others. And I'm not going to go through these in detail. This is also in the training video, as well as all of the requests for application materials that are available on the website. So, but anyway, you can see that I've mentioned some of these already with improving existing infrastructure to support the middle of the supply chain in Oregon. And then here are some of the, I do want to mention that some of you may be aware of the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center, which is USDA's complement to the Resilient Food System infrastructure. The centers are basically regional entities that are made up of a number of states. And Oregon is part of the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center, and this is a 5-year initiative that has been announced by USDA. And there will be a number of training and business training and assistance coming out from the center over the next few years. And there are some goals that the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center has identified. Again, this center is being launched almost simultaneously with RFSI. But if some of you are working on projects that are related to the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center, you can state those in your application as another priority area. And we'll drop the link to their website in the chat box here, so you can go take a look at some of their priority areas. The priority areas that I think maybe most resonate with this group are there's market development for climate resilient agriculture, and cover products that don't really have very well developed markets. That's one of their sort of priority areas that the center has. And then there are also some priority areas around helping food entrepreneurs and small food businesses scale their markets, or even enter into wholesale markets, or start working with a little bit bigger scaled processors. So we'll drop their website in the chat box, so you can see some of their other goals and see if they match or align with what you're proposing. And then these are some of the equipment priorities. And again, same goes for the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center. If there are some goals that the center has stated that align with what you're proposing, you can indicate that in your application. All right, we talked just for a few minutes about the timeline earlier, but this gives you kind of a better picture of what's going to be happening over the next couple months. And as we mentioned earlier, we will be hosting a number of office hours during the month of January to help answer questions and give people an opportunity to, collaborate on different ideas. So like we said, the infrastructure grant track is currently open. It does close February 29th, and the equipment track opens February 1st and also closes February 29th. So once these grants both close, there will be an internal review process. And as you can see there, that's sort of our proposed timeline over there, that we hope to meet those dates internally. And so it looks like, hopefully by what we tentatively hope is that by the week of May 1st, applicants will be notified if their applications have been selected to submit to the USDA for approval. And then hopefully, based on USDA's process, we'll be able to get the grant work started, get all of the contracts fully executed, and get some of those initial funds out the door by August or early fall of 2024. All right, so application steps. Gabrielle, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So just so everyone is on the same page about what happens to your application once it gets to us, we wanted to go over what application steps would happen. So essentially, once you apply to the program, again, we suggest watching the training video that we've put together. It literally talks through every section of the application, what we need to see there, how to apply, what everything means. Once we receive the application, it will go through a preliminary review for allowability, completeness, and feasibility. Essentially, this review makes sure that you're working with the correct type of crops. You have what we talked about earlier, the 50 or the 25% matching, and that your program is even feasible to do within the 3-hour time frame. That happens right at the program staff level. So essentially, me and some other program staff are going to review those applications. From there, the application gets assigned out to the advisory committee, which Amy spoke about earlier. Those advisory committee members will review the application based on the score sheet that you can find at the bottom of the request for applications document, which I put a link in our meeting chat. It says Oregon Department of Agriculture request for applications. It's an attachment in that document, so you can see what you will be scored on and what all of the points that happen for all of that. So the advisory committee will use that score sheet, score your application, and then we come together and discuss those applications, sending the score, the committee discussion, and the actual full application to our ODA leadership. The ODA leadership will review all of that, as well as a few other items, the location of the grants, the crops that they're working with, the overall impact of that grant across the entirety of the state and so on, and then they will select the grants from there. So once the grants have been selected, they will move on to the USDA review process, which is a whole other ball of wax that we will get to at that point with the applicants that are moved forward.
All right, so we're gonna these are just some of the required documentations that you need to submit with your application. So for both the infrastructure and equipment, there are cover pages in the application and the RFA. And I think Gabrielle has shared the RFA link already. Let's see, we could drop that in the chat box if we haven't yet. But essentially the cover pages will ask questions, basically some of the screening and eligibility questions that will determine whether or not you're eligible for these funds, but also some of those priority areas that we've discussed. Those are also captured in the cover pages as well. And then there will be two attachments or letters that you may, for matching for the infrastructure grant, you are required, of course, to have the matching. For the critical resource and infrastructure letter, this may not apply to you. It'll really depend on the type of project that you have. But this is essentially a letter that helps describe contributions from, if for example, you're going to be working with a landowner or a building owner, and they're going to be providing some level of infrastructure that helps your project succeed. They would be the ones that would prepare this letter with you. And so whoever owns that critical resource would be the one to complete this infrastructure letter. You can also use this letter also may be necessary if you're using some of that infrastructure towards your matching requirement. So, but we can get into, if there's more questions about that letter, we can respond to that. And then the same really goes for the equipment application. The cover page sort of covers some of those basic screening questions, gathers some personal business information. And then again, you've got that critical resource and infrastructure letter that you may need to submit, but it's not necessarily a requirement. All right, so that is our address. That's our mail or our email address. So we do have a general inbox for this grant program. So if you do have questions, please do submit those based on that address there, and we'll drop that in the chat box. But now we'll just open it up for questions from the group, or if there's any more specific details that we can help clarify for you. All right, looks like I see a question from Nia. Do you want to go ahead? I don't think we're able to hear you, Nia.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Good morning. I was trying to figure out the actual time frame of completing the project, in the PDF that has the whole breakdown of the grant program, I'm seeing that it says that the project has to be completed within 2 years.
The project, the project is a 3-year time period for the infrastructure grants. So that's based on the date of awardship. So if you, if your project was selected, and once your project or once your contract is fully executed between the organization that's applying for the funds and the state of Oregon and Department of Ag, that's the date in which your project begins. And so you have 3 years from that date.
Amy, I'm actually going to correct you here. You don't. We have a final date that projects are going to end by, and that's January 1st of 2027. So we're hoping, we cross all of our fingers and toes, that the USDA is going to be able to award the grants by August of this year. So that essentially gives you 2.5 years. But the document that you're reading was created before the USDA fully approved our plan, and there was some back and forth we needed to do with them, which ultimately reduced the amount of time that applicants will have to do the project. So projects must be completed by January 1st of 2027. And that's what we're looking at. That's how the grant agreement will be written. And we're hoping, like I said, we hope that they'll approve them by August. They could approve them by June, and then you get a little extra time. But the final end date of the project is January 1st of 2027.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had saw October 1st, 2026, so that's why I was a little confused in the whole request for application publication. So maybe that just hasn't been updated yet.
Yeah, a lot of that documentation hasn't been updated because it's been downloaded so many times and shared so many times. We wanted to make sure that it got out there, and then we'll issue a correction and clarify it in meetings like this.
Awesome, thank you.
This is Vicki Hurdle. May I ask a question?
Go ahead, Vicki.
I'm a little confused on the priority groups. Is this further explained on the YouTube video? I understand some of the points there. Woman owned. Well, I'm a woman, but my husband owns it with. We're in an area that doesn't have the storage we need. We need to build our own. I don't know if that's a priority group. I don't know if we're looking at different races, sexes, or we're looking at, I'm confused is what I am. And is that clarified anywhere?
So the priority groups are determined by the USDA. And so those groups are, if you have questions about whether you meet the definition of those groups, the best source for that is in the program scope and requirements document, which is on the USDA's Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program website. And so the historically underserved, they do want us to focus these dollars on historically underserved farmers or ranchers and or businesses that meet the SBA's definition of a small disadvantaged business. And so those definitions are actually kind of tiered. And so when you look in the program scope and requirements, for example, USDA determines that historically underserved farmers and ranchers include beginning farms and ranches, veteran and limited resource farms and ranches. So it's best if you actually look at what their definitions are in that document. And
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
So there were some questions about the types of products that, or types of projects that USDA has in mind for this funding, and Gabrielle has put a list of those different examples or scenarios in the chat box. And again, this would be for, right now we're talking about infrastructure grants. And so you can see some of those examples in there that include purchases beyond equipment only.
And USDA examples are not all that great. So some of the things that we've been called about, Amy, I'm sure you have some examples of folks who've called you too. You could be installing cold storage to increase facilities' ability to receive product from those around them to then distribute it out. So it could be cold storage. It could be increasing processing power in adding a processing line for whatever crop or product. It could be doing a number of things like that, purchasing transportation equipment to move things from point A to point B so that you can aggregate them, and so on. The list in there is not great, but it is a list.
Yeah, so, some other examples would be, there's a big need for minimally processed fruits and vegetables in the state, particularly for institutions um, like schools and hospitals and even restaurants. So, a project that would actually help you either build out a space for prepping fresh fruits and vegetables, and then, peeling, chopping, dicing, coining things, and then packaging those minimally processed fruit and vegetables into the right size of packaging and labeling that's necessary for that, and then storing those products on site in proper cold storage, and then transporting them into the distribution system that they're going into. Those types of projects would be allowable. Other questions, clarifications? Christy, do you have, go ahead.
Yeah, can you just maybe just go a little bit further? Because I'm sure I'm not the only person who works with both allowable and unallowable items. Maybe just a little bit more clarification around that, because I don't know that, I mean, I knew this grant was coming down the pipe, but I didn't know that piece of it. And so I'm still trying to figure out how to work with that.
Yeah, so that one, if you have a business or you're running an operation that is handling products or ingredients that are both from allowable product categories and the unallowable product categories like meat, poultry, or wild-caught seafood, what you will need to do is, to the best estimate you can, determine the percentage of your whatever it is that, whatever activity it is, whether it's aggregation, whether it's some sort of processing, whatever it is that the activity is that you're doing, you're going to need to, estimate or determine the percentage of that project that would focus on the allowable allowable products or allowable ingredients. And that would be what the grant could actually cover. So you would not be able to receive funding, say, for the percentage of time or the percentage of activity of processing seafood or IQ, if you're IQFing seafood, or you're doing something with the seafood that would be part of the middle of supply chain activities, but it wouldn't be allowable to receive funds to support that, unfortunately. So if you have a way to determine, and that, I think that's going to be something that people will need to kind of sit down and really think about, like the portion of time or activities related to the allowable and unallowable products. USDA has said that we can only provide funding for activities related to those allowable crops or products. And that would also include matching. So you wouldn't be able to use matching activities in kind or cash from those unallowable areas or crops. So, and Gabrielle, if you want to help clarify that, I know that's really nuanced and confusing. So if you have anything to add.
Yeah, for sure. So Christy, your earlier question, for everyone who maybe wasn't reading the chat, she asked something about transportation, if they're transporting some allowable products and some not. Let's say, for sake of numbers, you're using 40% of the transportation for unallowable activities and 60% for allowable. You could ask for up to 60% of the cost of the item to be brought within the grant. The remaining 40% you could not bring as match to the grant. So one of the weird things about federal dollars is matching funds have to be allowable activities within the normal framework of the grant to be brought as match. So the remaining 60%, you would have to pay out of pocket or through a different source, and is not going to be able to be recognized within the matching funds of the grant. So just note that you would only be able to get up to 40% of that transportation cost, and then you have to figure out the remaining 60% outside the guides of the grant in order to even complete that portion of the grant. So it's a little weird. It's a little nuanced. Like Amy said, if you have a more specific example, I can try to work you through it and walk you through it, but that's kind of the best of my ability with these ones. It's really hard.
Yeah, and
so
I
one thing,
would
one
just
thing,
say,
go ahead, Amy.
I would just say that I know some of you that are running smaller hub-like programs, or you have physical food hubs that are handling a lot of mixed product. I think the best thing to do is to call Gabrielle or myself and really just talk through that scenario, because it doesn't apply to a lot of other maybe a little bit larger processors that maybe only handling a lot of processors aren't handling both those types of ingredients. I think some of the aggregators are, but anyway, so I think in those instances, maybe just calling and having a conversation would probably be the best option for those of you doing handling a lot of mixed products.
Yeah, that sounds good. I just want to, put it on your radar, because I'm not going to be the only one calling you.
Totally understandable. Thanks.
Yeah, this is a question we get a lot. And something I would like to recommend to most folks is to maybe get an extra 10% in your matching. So do 30% or 60% matching, because if there are items that are unallowable within your matching that you don't call us and say, hey, is this allowable? Then you'll be under the matching requirement, and your project could get thrown out, because if 10% of your matching is unallowable and you only had 50%, you're now at 40%, which you have not requested. You don't have enough match to meet the program requirements. So I suggest having just a little bit more match than what is required just to cover your bacon. But we're also, as Amy said, here to assist. So feel free to give us a call and ask those questions, and we can point you in the right direction.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The matching funds, is that cash only or can that be later?
The matching funds are both cash match as well as in-kind. So you can bring other sources besides cash. So that can be in the form of, an existing facility that's going to be used, that's going to be used as part of your project. That can also be donated, or sorry, not donated, but that can also be donated like labor time towards the project. So if someone is going to install some pieces of equipment and they're going to do that without money exchanging hands, that can be considered in kind as well. You can also use some overhead costs like rental. If you're paying fees or you have rent fees for a space you're using, that can also be used as an in-kind match contribution as well.
Thank you.
Other questions about any of the materials, the request for applications or guidance that's available on our website? Or questions about anything we've gone over, anything else we've gone over today?
If everyone would be willing to put their email address in the chat, I will add you guys to our email listserv so you get all the updates about this program.
We'll give everybody just a minute or so to add their email addresses to the chat box. And of course, if there's more questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask. We will be posting, so this session is being recorded, so we will be posting this on our website under the Portland Metro regional office hour call. So if you want to listen to it again, you'll be able to you'll be able to go back to it. So that will be listed on our main webpage under the Resilient Food System Infrastructure. And then the slide deck, yes, the slide deck is essentially what is in the training video. So again, I really encourage you, Gabrielle did a really nice job providing all of the very specific details of this grant program in the training video. And so if you go to the main webpage at oda.direct, here I'm typing that in, you'll find the training video basically right on the main page there. So if you use that short link, the training video is about an hour and a half long, but it goes through each element of the application, walks through the score sheet, and answers a lot of some of the detailed questions related to the program. So yeah, so we can make these slides available. I'll talk to Gabrielle about how to do that. And yeah, Charlene, that is the website.
I wish I could chat.
Do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did unmute it. This is Vicky at Sun Gold Farm, and I'm not able to chat. My email address. For some reason, it says I need more than one person. So I'll just email it to you.
Vicki, we're having a hard time hearing you. I think there's just a bad connection. If you want to send us an email, feel free to.
That's what I'll do.
Okay, yeah, the Resilient System Grant at oda.oregon.gov. I'm putting it in the chat box. I know you probably can't see that, but if you reach out to myself or Gabrielle, again, if you go to the web page or send an email to resilientsystemgrant@oda.oregon.gov, we can answer your questions that way too. I'm sorry you're having connectivity issues. Has everybody had a chance to enter their email address into the chat box? If you haven't and you'd like to, please go ahead and do that now. So we'll make sure you get signed up on our listserv for all announcements related to RSFI. Gabrielle has also put her phone number in there. Here's mine as well, in case you have any questions and need to contact us directly. We have been really closely monitoring the Resilient System Grant email, so that's also a great way to get a hold of us. I think I'll just give it one more minute for any questions or anything that's top of mind for folks, and then we'll probably close the call today. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us today, and please check out our website for all the materials related to RFSI. If you have questions, you've got the general email inbox and our phone numbers, so please feel free to reach out if there's anything that we can help with. You're also welcome to attend another one of the office hours Those are by region, but anyone can call into any one of those and get their questions answered. And those again are listed on the website, so you can see the upcoming calendar of when those will be held. So good luck with the applications. Please feel free to reach out if you have any specific questions for us, and we're happy to help.